All right, good morning, everyone. My name's Rich Mogul. Well, you can tell because it's on the slide. My title's on the slide. My email address is on the slide. So cool, we're done with intros. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us this morning for the Hacker's Guide to Cloud Governance. Now, this is going to be a little bit of a different presentation for me because the idea behind this, so I've been working in security for a very long time. I've been working in cloud security for a very long time. And disclaimers, when I'm going to talk about socially engineering your CEO, I take no legal responsibility for that. And I've been involved in cloud for a long time. So I got involved in cloud about 12 years ago. I think that's the age of my oldest Amazon account. And I'm a very technically oriented person. Yeah, I used to be a Gartner analyst, and then after I de-lobotomized myself on the technology side of things to get back into the real world, and I got heavily and deeply involved in cloud. And I took a very technology-centric focus to it. I love playing with cloud. I did hacking demos at DEF CON on cloud, like all sorts of stuff, and spent the last 10, 12 years building cloud solutions, advising companies, doing technical assessments. And time again, I kept coming back to the problem, like, oh crap, it's governance. Like, as much as I want to blame cloud technology for everything else, and I sat there, I'm like, why is this such a problem for us? And so that's when I put my little DEF CON hat on and try to take a little bit more of this kind of hacker mentality, like, what is it about cloud that's just screwing us up so bad? And what can we do about it? And then how can we kind of leverage more creative techniques to fix governance? Honestly, to look at this more as much as a technology problem as we do an organizational management problem. And is that something we could pull together? And that's kind of where I came up with the idea for this talk. Because the thing that I realized is cloud is just a massive DDoS attack against our governance structures. And in very specific and measurable ways. Because cloud is all about decentralization. And we built all of our governance structures about centralization. And at the same time, there's technology aspects of cloud. So this is going to be a weird talk because I'm like going to start with this stuff, and then I'm going to do code demos later, and then at the end I'm going to talk about org charts. Like, I'm really freaking schizophrenic, and I've got no idea where this is going to go or what we're going to do. I mean, I do. I have slides. I had to submit them and get them reviewed. But we're going to be a little bit, hopefully I got some structure in this and give you some creative ideas for managing at the end. Because years ago I did a Twitter post back before Twitter became a cesspool of ridiculousness, and wow, yeah. I wish I had $44 billion to waste like that. It's cool. I might spend it on an airplane or something, but whatever. The tweet was, I realized that like all cloud security failures are identity management failures, and all identity management failures were governance failures. And that's what set me down this path in trying to figure all of this out. And we see this time and time again in organizations. I had posted something. This is a friend from online on Mastodon, which is not the cesspool, and experiencing the same thing. Like, how do we deal with governance with these decentralized, distributed teams? How do we deal with the impact that cloud and DevOps and everything is having on our organization? And so, being a former analyst, I have a massive freaking ego, and I decided to call this the Grand Unified Theory of Cloud Governance. And the idea behind this, and what I realized, and this is where that whole cloud is a DDoS attack came up, that I came up with. If you look at how we've managed IT, and in particular IT security and governance and compliance, for the past 20, 30 years, it's all been based on a scarcity of resources and physical choke points. That is not a negative. That is not a negative at all. It's not that we've been mean. It's not that we've been parental to our and not trusting of our teams. It's like we have data centers. There's only so many molecules of airspace where you can plug in networking wires. There's only so many ways we can configure those things. A developer is not going to go in and build their own network. A developer is not going to go in and provision their own server because we have physical hardware constraints. And even with virtualization, we still have all of those constraints. And all of the other things that we do, the firewalls, all of that. We had to have separate teams manage those, especially as we grew in large organizations, and separate processes to manage all of those. And our governance emerged from the environment that it lived in. So we don't have those physical constraints with cloud. It's very decentralized. Now the problem is while we decentralized it, we unified the administration of it into single portals and single sets of APIs. So let's take the entire data center, let's unify it into one portal, and let's put it on the internet, and let's protect it with a username and a password. That's going to work out really well for us. And that is exactly what we have done. Maybe MFA for those of you that pay attention. And so it's all been this natural evolution of these natural choke points that we've had. And we have moved from the model where everything is decentralized, where everybody has to ask for permission, where other teams have to build things for other teams, into this democratized and decentralized model, where me as an individual developer, I can go out, I can launch my Class B network in less than 2 minutes on AWS. It takes more about 5 minutes on Azure. I don't know, I haven't used enough GCP. And I can build my own Class B network, and I can build my own servers, and I can pull images down from other sources, and I can pull down code from other sources, and I can launch serverless functions, and I can get databases up and running without me having to. Has anybody ever had to patch Oracle or configure it? Like, yeah, oh God, I'm really sorry. I have a good therapist, so if you need them. Pretty expensive though. But hey, if you're working on Oracle, you can afford it. So, unless, well, let's be honest, all that money goes to Oracle. So, but I can do all of these things. I can be full stack. Like, full stack's freaking real today. One person can build all of that. I'm not going to say they're going to build it well. Anybody who's looked at my code knows that I don't build it well. But I can do it, and I can get it up and running and working. It's a very different environment than we ever had to manage before, because I don't need to go ask for the network. I don't need to go ask for the servers. I don't need someone else to provision those things for me, because either the cloud is doing it for me, or I can download versions of it that somebody else has set up for me, and then I just tweak it all to make my own stuff work. But again, at the same time, we've unified all this. Now, when I made that tweet about all major cloud security failures or identity management failures, I'm not screwing around. Like, that's real. If you look at cloud vulnerability databases, so I'll call out Chris Ferris in the room. He's talking on some similar stuff this afternoon, except his is more in the seat because he's been the one running this stuff. And Chris and I were talking last night or the day before. It's like, it's just all comes down to credentials on GitHub. Like, that's where most of these breaches happen, or credentials in code, or credentials that you left on the sticky note at the Starbucks cafe. Because now, like, even like my 10-year-old at Starbucks is like, Dad, that's a secret access key, and can figure that shit out. So that's the world we're living in. And security. When I first started doing all this cloud stuff, I walk in, and what's the very first thing every organization does? They lock down the cloud network. Well, that's not going to do a lot of fucking good. Sorry, I have a language issue. And by the way, that was not actually an apology. It's just a statement. So he's like, that's what we're in, the world. Like, the attackers, when they compromise your developer and admins' laptops and desktops today, what are they going to look for? They're looking for access keys. They're looking for SAML tokens. They're going to bridge into the cloud. Because they know if they can get in there, they freaking own everything. Like, that is the jewels. And we still in security are like, I need my DMZ. I need my DMZ. I need my DMZ. Has anybody seen my DMZ? Where can I find my DMZ? And that's not going to work for this. Then we try and build our security based on a history and our governance of all the security frameworks, NIST CSF, NIST 853, PCI requirements, all of and whatever your flavor of the month is, the ANISA stuff and everything else. You know what? They all suck ass for cloud, because they have taken existing frameworks that worked very well for the environment that they were built for, and then tried to extend those into cloud. But the people doing that are not pragmatic, practical people with hands-on cloud experience. They read my blog post to figure out your security standards, and that's really not a good thing. And so the frameworks and stuff that we're using aren't effective for cloud in many cases. And we've tried to do work for this. The Cloud Security Alliance, I do a lot with them. And like the CCM and other tooling are trying to bridge these gaps. But it's really hard, because if you talk to the people at the CSA, when they're running these groups, they have to make it familiar to the people who really know the existing and the older frameworks. And it makes it much harder to bridge people's skills and knowledge across in those areas. And in my book, we just need to throw all that stuff away to the greatest degree possible. Now, we don't throw it away. We build adjuncts, and we're going to get into that and how we focus on it. But our frameworks were not designed for cloud. Now, it doesn't mean the frameworks are all bad. So talking about like SOC 2 audits and stuff, yeah, my cloud frameworks have nothing to do with human resources, and they don't cover BYOD policies and employee networks and all of those pieces. We still need all of that. Most of you still have data centers. We still need all of that. I'm not crapping on the frameworks that they are bad. I'm just saying they are not very good for cloud. And that really moves us in the wrong directions. So how are we going to break this up? This is enough of me throwing problems and complexities and why this is all different. But I think it's important to understand those differences. Because if you really slice to the heart of what's going on here, is we had a technology paradigm shift. And it requires a governance paradigm shift. And at the same point, we can't throw away our old governance because we still have a lot of the traditional old stuff. And so to me, that's why this becomes, in many ways, you can't solve the governance problem without understanding the technology pieces. And that's why I think taking this hacker mindset approach is a great way to address these issues. So how can we actually go ahead? What are the things that we can do with this? The start is, this is like the cheeky social engineering your org. No, I just put that on the slide because it has to meet the theme of my presentation. What we're really talking about is the bigger issues I found. I have advised, no joke, I have advised some of the biggest of the big organizations out there on their cloud security strategies. In governments, financial institutions, everything. That's was my bread and butter for a while before coming over to Firemon. And one of the things that I've really consistently found is you have to understand the people, the motivations, and the politics, or none of this is going to work. I've joked on some of the calls. I said, can you get the executive leadership to sign on board to this and to put these rules in place? Well, they don't really want to. And I'm like, that's fine. You just know you can't fix this. I'll give you the best tools in the toolbox available to minimize the damage. But if your organization, if you can't line everybody up on the same page, then you're not going to have any success with this. I mean, that's governance. We've all seen it, all right? When political leaders get distracted by nonsense, they don't do their jobs anymore. And the same thing happens in organizations. So a big part of it is understanding what is it the executives care about, and can we take that and leverage it to our advantage to communicate with them better to adjust their prioritizations. And you can't always. I'm a pragmatist. I'm giving you tools that may or may not work. These are the best ones that I know of, but they may or may not work. So for the most part, this list is what most of the executives out there tend to really care about, the C levels. Don't get breached. By the way, let me rephrase that. Do they care about getting breached? Who says yes? Who says no? Who says yes if it's going to end up in the headlines? Don't get breached. It's more don't get caught being breached. That's what they care about. It's that public. So understand the true motivations about it. This is why those of you who've been in other leadership positions, if one of your peers gets hacked, what's the first thing that happens? Your CEO goes, how do we make sure that doesn't happen to us? And then your answer can be, stop being such a dumbass. And then their answer is, thank you for your service. But at least you've spoken truth to power. That always works out great. Don't get publicly breached. Don't have audit findings. Because for those of you in the regulated industries, of course it's going to be a major motivator. That's a real pain in the butt because there's definite consequences to that. Keeping visibility and control as you start getting into IT leadership. All right, why? Well, people freak out if they don't know what they have, if they can't answer those questions, especially as we start moving into cloud with billing and everything else that might be motivated. And that's where those cost things come in. And so the motivation is what is the desired outcomes, and then what is also their personal goals. Do they want the next job? Do they want to create their own internal silo so they don't ever get moved out? We had somebody at my current employer apparently told one of our leaders, we came in through acquisition, a bunch of people took over the company. He goes, well, I've ridden out the last 3 CTOs. I'll be here after you're gone. Was wrong. Was wrong that day. Wasn't a conversation I had. It was relayed to me. So there's a lot of, because that individual thought they built an impenetrable silo around themselves. So understand all of those motivations, and that is just critical, the internal politics of all of this to be able to be successful. But this is where it has to start, is at that leadership level. So, the executives, they tend to be distracted and abstracted from the practical technical issues. They're going to be based on what are their peers doing, what are they hearing at, You know, what's the latest report? What's the latest article that they've read about things? So knowing that, just understand that you going up to them and saying, Azure's network default's open. That's not the answer to those communication issues. But again, their motivations may be different. With managers, and these are the issues that I've run into that are directly the most common obstacles to effective cloud governance. So let's be clear. This isn't generic crap. This is in the places I've gone where they have these executive level leadership issues in cloud. These are the most common. There's managers who don't like giving up control. Now, why is this such a problem in cloud? Because there's a different set of technologies with a different set of skills, so you tend to have to hire different leadership and subject matter experts. And so if you have the network person who doesn't want to give up control of the networks, they're going to try to enforce a traditional network control scarcity model on the organization on the cloud side. That happens very commonly because they want to keep that ownership. You have to be able to sense this out. The practitioners, a lot of them are very overloaded. Look, I'm lucky. I've been incredibly fortunate in my career that I get to kind of just pick and choose what I get to do at any given point in time. And I love technology, and I get excited about new stuff. So it's worked very well for me as this cloud stuff developed. There are other people that want to work 9 to 5 and go home at the end of the night. And they don't want to do the extra studying. And they don't want to feel like they're never going to catch up, because I feel like that every day. I am never going to catch up with the cloud technologies. I am never going to know enough, despite doing nothing but this for 12 years. And that's hard to accept, and you're constantly running and trying to keep up to date on everything that's going on. And some people just want to go home and do their jobs and go to bed. And there's nothing wrong with that. They're also known as healthy, well-adapted individuals. I don't really understand it. I guess it's a thing. But that's a whole different perspective on it, and we have to understand that that can be an issue. You can't take someone like that and say, cool, we want you to become a cloud expert in your spare time, and you're going to go run our cloud networks and servers and workstations and serverless now. Not going to happen. Then the devs. Devs are differently motivated. They're more like me. They have more of that hacker, I want to play with the new technologies. Why? What's the career advancement for a developer versus the career advancement for a network administrator? For the developer, it's knowing the new languages, it's knowing the new coding techniques, it's knowing the new technologies so they can move faster and move up their chain, because that's what motivates that part. That's how that aspect works. And we have to understand all of those as we go to try to build our central governance. The best tool for this is the Cloud Center of Excellence. I don't know who came up with that really crappy name, but it is what it is. I think an accountant came up with that because it's boring, or maybe an auditor. You know, auditors, they're accountants without personalities. And hey, how many auditors are in the room before I tell that joke? Cool. All right, we're doing well here. Brian, you don't count. So, all right. So the Cloud Center of Excellence. What is the idea of this? I'm assuming you are not born in the cloud companies. This doesn't matter if you are. But if you are a traditional organization like the ones that I have come from in my past, you have to pull together the experts from the different areas of what you do. Because a large percentage of what you're going to do is like lift and shift and migrating stuff up into cloud. And you put together a council to make the cloud decisions. And I'm going to give you some key things about this and structural models for this. But the idea is you ideally will have at least some dedicated cloud engineering, cloud architecture, whatever you want to call it, that are going to be at the center of this. And then you're going to get participation from the other teams. Now, the reason for this is there's this really, cloud affects everything. And so you're almost building a parallel IT structure for managing cloud. And you have to do that because what's not going to work is if everybody has their regular jobs and has to do everything they've always done before, and now they have to do something entirely new on a technology platform that bears absolutely no resemblance at the lowest technical levels to what they've built their entire careers on. Do you think that's going to work? No. So trying to build that parallel structure and allow them to do the education control. Now there's some key things about this. First of all, it's not going to work without the executive support, which is why I wasted all the time talking about people and personalities at the start of this. I've seen CCOEs stood up. There's no executive support necessarily. The CCOE, the Cloud Center of Excellence, has no authority and no direct, maybe responsibility, but no authority. They can't make decisions. They can't write policies that get signed off on. They can't say no. They can't say yes. They don't have budget authority to buy the tooling that they need. That's how you set it up for failure. The executives have to back it. They have to have that ability to go ahead and have authority and responsibility. There's a couple of main models for CCOEs. I'm going to go talk about those on the next slide. You also need to make sure you have subject matter expertise that is specific to the clouds on which you operate. Another thing I threw out on Twitter, again, pre-cesspool days, was you want to go multi-cloud? That's great. Triple your security and IT staff. Anybody here work on more than one cloud at a technical level? Like, okay, so Chris and I have done this, and we do horror stories. We're both very good on AWS. He went down the GCP path. I went down the Azure path. They're really different. At like Azure's network defaults open. Whole different way you write and manage security groups. Whole different way you peer networks. That's just on the networking side of things. Never mind how everything else works. You want to launch a serverless function in Azure, an Azure function, compare that to a Lambda function in Amazon and how those things work and integrate them into their event buses. I've done it on both. It's really hard to know. Nobody has that level of knowledge on every cloud provider. I don't know. I socialize and work with the best cloud security experts on the planet. I don't know anybody who is competent, truly competent on more than one cloud platform at a time. You got to shift your focus, but that's it. And you think you're going to go multi-cloud without subject matter experts working on your team. Never, ever going to happen. So you want to have a subject matter expert that works for you. Don't rely completely on your cloud provider. I was out, took a call from an org recently. They had a great setup. They did absolutely everything Amazon told them to do, and they're paying for every single Amazon service Amazon told them to use. They're not always the best for every environment. They're not always the worst. See, I mean, they're great. There's nothing wrong with what they did, but they did not, they were just doing what the vendor told them to do. That's a bad path. It's nothing against the vendors. That's just a bad path in general. You also have to make sure don't rely on external consultants. Most of them suck, myself included, or they're going to be looking for the next gig, but they're not your long-term help. Bring someone like me. I'm a hired gun, and I don't do that work anymore, but if you were, I'll come in, I'll do my job. That's great. I'll go away. Hopefully your people know what to do after that. That's good. But if you rely on them, you're going to lose them. Build it up internally and make sure it's specific for the cloud that you use. And you want to staff that with the intellectually curious. You don't want to force it on somebody. You want to give it to somebody who wants to make their career in cloud. Then you never, ever, ever let them talk to Amazon or Microsoft directly. Why? Because Amazon or Microsoft are going to hire them away from you. I've seen that happen 5 times in the last 2 years. Their internal cloud expert they trained up now works for Amazon or Microsoft. Just haven't done enough Google projects. I'm sure they do the same thing. Now, in terms of the org structure for the CCO, you've got your expertise, you have the executive leadership. How do you structure it? You can have embedded and dedicated, probably a mixture of both. What's dedicated? You have a cloud networking team dedicated that just does cloud networking, and they'll parallel and peer with the regular networking team, but for the most part, that's all that they're focused on. Or, and again, a lot of this comes down to size, you can have 1 or 2 experts on your regular networking team dedicated to cloud, but they still report in through that networking structure and they dotted line report in. How do you make the decision between this? Just what works for your culture, what works for your organization. There's no one way to do any of this. Again, just giving potential tools in the toolbox that can possibly help you out. Now, once you get some of that organizational stuff in, you got to get a handle on everything you have. The easiest, best thing to do is start building out a cloud registry. Comprehensive registry of every account. Who is the provider? What is the application? Who is the business owner? Who is the technical owner? Who's the technical account manager from your cloud provider? What is the classification level? What is the compliance level? It's okay to do this in a spreadsheet. You can get a lot of real-time stuff out of your cloud via APIs and stuff. At a certain point, you want to be pulling like regular reports for this. Why? Because if you have an incident, because this is going to be really important for your IR team as well. And if you have an incident and you don't have a version of it that's offline, maybe they're not going to be able to get in and get it. So just make sure that you've got that list. This is the know what you have and where it is piece and what the classification is. Because when an incident occurs, when a problem occurs, this helps you focus on the ones that matter more than anything else. Then we have to start building our governance hierarchy. This is what are the sets, how do we encode what we're doing into documents and tools for implementing our governance? This is not specific for cloud. We already do this. We tend to have a high-level security framework. A lot of you use NIST CSF or something equivalent to that. I've seen a lot of orgs just build their own. I'm going to have one that I'm going to show you in a minute. Below that is usually information security policy. What's information security policy? That tends to be, the word policy is like one of the most loaded words that we have. It's like the F word. It can mean anything depending on how it's used in a sentence. In this case, policy can mean almost anything depending on how it's used in a sentence. The version I'm talking about is, tends to be the high-level prose for what are the rules of the road. And what I mean by prose is, you all know you write policies, people read policies, and they sign that they understand policies. That is a fraction of what we have to do for security and compliance and governance, but that's a starting point, and it's required by pretty much every compliance thing that's out there that you have to have policies around these. Policies are great, but they're not machine readable. And that's what we want to start driving down into. And so underneath your high-level information security policy, it'll cover your BYOD, it'll cover your general rules of the road for what you're doing. Again, tends to be a very high-level piece. Then we get into control objectives. And you're going to have general ones that have nothing to do with security. But for cloud security, and we're going to spend a bunch of time talking about those, cloud security control objectives, these are much more critical in cloud than they are in traditional infrastructure. Traditional infrastructure, we can frequently go from policies to controls. We skip over the control objectives. Why? Because the technology, we only have to do it like once because there's one network or one style of network or whatever. We have that ability to drop into that level. But with cloud, we're dealing with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fundamentally different technology platforms. And we have to implement that same control objective differently on each of those. And so this will make more sense as I give you the examples in a minute. So we do our control objectives, then we get down into the individual controls, which are the control specifications. That is the technical thing, machine readable to the greatest degree possible, automated to check to the greatest degree possible, but actually how you implement that control objective. And there's a one-to-many across all of these. So let's flow through this. So the idea of the framework is this is going to be the top-level guiding principles. I recommend using a cloud security specific framework. Now, my bias is towards, so this is the cloud security maturity model. You're not expected to know this or read this. It's just an example. But this is the one that we wrote a while ago. Why does it say Securus? Oh, it says IANS. Yeah, sorry, not AWS. Securus IANS. We're actually updating this and working. We've got some people from the Cloud Security Alliance here working on it as well, that this is aligns with the work that the Cloud Security Alliance has done. The idea of this is not a replacement for NIST CSF. It's a cloud security framework that can be in parallel because these are the areas to focus on for cloud that are different than NIST CSF, which have to cover everything you do. That's why it's important. It's the give me my cloud adjunct of what I need to focus on when I'm solving the cloud problems. I don't need to know my data center infrastructure stuff. I don't need to know my BYOD. I don't need to know my mobile policies. That is all well covered. This is the when I need to focus on cloud framework. So that's the idea behind this. And there's some other options out there. One org I've been doing some work with lately, a big financial, they just have their own. It's really good. It's very close to this one. That's great. The Cloud Security Alliance guidance is a good place. And we're actually realigning this with the guidance and with the Cloud Controls Matrix. So there's projects there to kind of like make this all flow out. It's an organizational tool. Now, after that, we get into the control objectives themselves. This is the bread and butter. I've done a few of these projects. I really hope to have like an open source version that I can release. Problem is when I've done it, it's usually for a client under NDA. But I'm really close to having a version of this we can release. This is a checklist of your desired controls that are outcome focused. These are the outcomes you want to achieve. That's what a control objective is. It doesn't tell you how to do it. It tells you what the end result should be, and it should be measurable, and it should follow the SMART acronym. My side hobby is I'm a disaster response paramedic, or one side hobby. And I have to go through all this incident command system training from the federal government. We always talk a lot about metrics when you go through the higher level ICS training. And one of the things there is you want all of your metrics to be SMART, because you have to set metrics up for each operational operational cycle when you're running on a large or even a small disaster. And the idea is it should be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-based. That's the definition of what those objectives should be. For your cloud security control objectives, you can drop the time range on it, because a lot of these are just going to be continuous. Platform agnostic, and you never ever want to have language like have a policy and procedure for XYZ. That is the most freaking useless statement that's out there. That should be above that. That is not a control objective. That's a governance objective. You can do that somewhere else. I don't like the have a policy and procedure for. Control objectives should be much more detailed, such as establish single sign-on for all human user access to cloud environments and that are integrated with federation, ideally through a central portal. Now, if you have certain technology things, you can adjust this statement to be like, all SSO access shall be through the security team's approved IAM portal, SSO portal or Federation portal, something like that. So tune the language for what you're doing. But it doesn't tell you the name of the technology. It is specific in terms that it's focused on human access. Why? Because you can't use this for service accounts. You can't use this for automation. So you have to have that delineation that's in there. It's specific because you're focusing on the cloud. Now, if you have it for all access for remote systems, that's great, whatever you want to do. But this would be a cloud-specific version of that. Another example, cloud security provider generated security feeds such as GuardDuty and Azure Defender for Cloud. By the way, Azure Defender isn't always Azure and it's not always Defender. I don't know, we'll get into that another day. Are centrally collected for all environments and regions in accordance with the requirements for the deployment security classification. Wait, what? Well, yeah. So you have to get the feeds that are from the cloud providers. They must be centrally collected. There's going to be all sorts of specific ways on how you do this. And it has to align with the security classification. So security can have a list of, if you're classified this, you have to have these feeds. If you're classified this, you have to have these feeds. Because you don't need every feed from every environment necessarily. That's a control objective. We name the technologies as examples, but we're not getting into the details of it. And then these control objectives map up to your higher level framework. The framework is an organizational tool. The control objectives defines your outcomes. The control specifications are the how do you achieve those outcomes. That's the flow. So in the foundational domain, this comes from the maturity model piece. We're actually renaming account security instructor organization management. That's where, in this case, use the cloud security provider's environment hierarchy to manage blast radius, include with clear decision criteria that guide projects. So now we have another layer of policies that'll come into play at a lower, which is more the descriptive how to achieve this, a policy or procedure document for this control objective. Does this all make sense? I know I'm already boring because like half the audience is leaving at this point, but we'll get there. And so this is an example of a bigger one. These slides will be online. You can read amongst yourself. Do you want to just pause and you can read? Okay, I won't make that any more awkward than it needed to be. And you organize those in those different categories. That's all the control objectives. Now your goal from there is to get into the control specifications, which are the vendor and technology specific implementation of a control objective. This is the how do you do it. You will typically have many control specifications per control objective. And there might be some overlap across the providers, but honestly, you write a different spreadsheet for each cloud provider with different control specifications for each cloud provider and hand it to the teams that are using that cloud provider. It's that level of detail. So if I have to implement how I define and manage a network security group in Azure is absolutely different than Amazon and Google. And there's going to be different rules of the road that I have to put in place in that. Now a lot of this mapping and everything else can get really messy. And I get the question a lot, where do we start? And there's a few different places that you can do this. Obviously your vendor tooling, I don't think you should be, look, I am a vendor, but don't trust us like to define your security strategy and your controls. We can be a helpful input, but you need to be figuring that out on your own. One cool way tool that I came up with is, so it turns out the cloud providers all have their own, yep, doing pretty good on time here. So the cloud providers all will often publish their way of achieving particular controls. So this one's a little out of date, but I'm going to show it to you. And so this is over on Microsoft's site, so I'm going to use an Azure example. Amazon has, they're called configuration pack or conformance packs, which are like examples of how you can actually implement using CloudFormation rules. This is Azure policy, and so you'll see the definition for the CIS controls, and they've got all of these ones here. I'm waiting for CIS2 to pop up. They don't have that in here yet because these tend to lag. The CIS2 was recently released, but or 853 here. So this gives you a kickstart because maybe this isn't exactly how you want to do it, but these are specific controls, and it's a library you can pull from to get ideas to get yourself started. Now, what are the problems with this for many of the vendors? One is the same control may map to multiple, the same control specification to multiple compliance requirements, and it's in a table on a web page. So what I did is, thanks to ChatGPT-4, Actually, no, I did this one with ChatGPT-3. All right. I actually wrote code. I'm not kidding. I don't write screen scraping code. I actually use one of those tools to help me write the screen scraping. So this code right here, yep, I'm all set to run it. It's actually connecting in, making the web call, and it just built me a table, a CSV file, of all of those controls on that database. And so what that looks like is here. This is the one that just launched. Let me open it in a spreadsheet format. And I just did that live. It just scraped it right then and there pretty easily. And so now I've got my IDs. I have the section and the name of the control, and then some other descriptions and other information, and then the URL for where to find it. So then I took that, and I have another batch of code. This one I had to write myself. Stupid ChatGPT. It's fine. It's fine. Which was an actual import function that takes this and throws it in a relational database. Now, silly me put this in a Docker container in an environment that I couldn't bring that with me to do this demo in time because I messed that up. But it looks like this. And basically, so I have a database where I've now mapped in a relational database. So any given control objective, here's the control specifications, organized by cloud provider, organized by compliance framework. This took me 2 days to pull together and to build this database. And I can scrape anything, and I can input any spreadsheet, and I can find all sorts of other sources as long as I can get an output source, and to organize all these controls in the frameworks and the databases. So that was my kind of way of doing this instead of just trying to manage it all by spreadsheets. So steal from the providers. You can use these things to identify gaps. You can track new services. You don't have to start from scratch. You just had to know where to look, and now you do, to at least get you started. Now that's all the detective pieces. We also have preventative governance controls we can put in place. So these are going to be service control policies, Azure policies, Google policies. These are absolutely critical to effective real-world cloud governance for implementing your controls, because these are policy as code, basically, that you can do different levels of enforcement. So you can lock down production environments, you can disable regions. This is built in every of the major cloud providers. When I say major cloud providers, I mean 3. Oracle's, I don't know, some of you have to use it. They're not totally horrible, but that's kind of it. They're like an extension. So, but all the major providers kind of enforce these things. So that's one way of doing enforcement. The other is you really want to try and manage your identity management perimeter as well. This is huge. Where can people log in from? Can be very important from a governance perspective. Now there's a data perimeter talk that Amazon has done. It can be done in Azure. It's a little harder, but you can use conditional access policies depending on which SSO stuff you've got tied in. Why is this important? The most common cloud breaches, somebody takes credentials, they steal them, and they use them from somewhere else. And they impersonate a user and do bad things. By far the most common. So if we can reduce that scope so that those API calls can't be made from anywhere on the internet, but from a subset. Now, does anybody know what the biggest thing that screws that up is from a technical level? It's the fact that the cloud providers themselves, when API calls come in from their IP address spaces, that becomes very hard for you to actually detect and prevent. But there are emerging techniques. Amazon's improved a lot there. I haven't played as much on Azure to know how enforceable that is. But so we call that managing the data perimeter or the IAM perimeter for access. Another really big part is, I'll get into it. I got another slide on dealing with prod. Now there's a lot of tools that can help you with this stuff. They're all called see something, depending on which analyst is fighting which other analysts for dominance. It really is totally a dominance play. Like you can read research reports from the analysts, and it's like establish your dominance by how many acronyms that they can come up with in a research report. But that said, these tools can be helpful. I get a lot of questions about confusion and stuff. I was actually talking with a different friend of ours at the CSA, John, yesterday. So what are the main categories that matter? Here's how to think about it. Cloud security posture management gives you visibility, sometimes control. It's going to give you the view of everything that you have. It should have an inventory. It should identify misconfigurations. That's the goal. It should give you your compliance reports. Cloud workload protection, that's the fancy word for shitty antivirus in cloud. And vulnerability analysis in cloud. Now, it turns out it can actually work better than some of our on-prem stuff. I like to get a laugh sometimes, so I do that by insulting people, but I'm no Don Rickles. But it's workload protection, especially for containers, you want to take a deep look at that kind of stuff. And then the last is CNAPP, which is all of the above plus infrastructure as code scanning, and that's because Gartner got bored with CSPM. I don't know. They came up with a new name, and that's what that is. So those are the main categories, but you can think of CNAPP as a combination of workload and CSPM and hopefully some infrastructure as code scanning to do the kind of full soup to nuts piece. Doesn't mean it's better, all right? It's different just because usually it's cobbled together from different sources. The tools aren't going to solve your problems. They're not. And like, yeah, I'm a vendor. I sell one of these kinds of things. I'm not going to solve your problems. The tools can help you get some more visibility control and give you an idea, better idea of what's going on in your environment. But at the end, you need to have your subject matter expertise. You need to know what your control objectives are, because these things are going to be noisy and you're not going to understand what the results are. So you have to know what you're doing before the tools will really, really help you. But if you need to get a kickstart, these are on the list. If you are moving into multi-cloud, these become mandatory. It's really hard to effectively manage any degree of multi-cloud at scale without some level of tooling. But you want to focus on the outcomes more than the products. What are the outcomes? Don't get breached in public. Don't have audit findings. Keep visibility control. Manage cost. Figure out what your desired outcomes are before you go out and you start spending money on tools. Vendor tools, open source tools, free tools, like all of them cost money. Yeah, I've got a free version. Anybody can use it. You know what? It's still going to cost you money in terms of your time to understand and know and set it up. That's just what it is. Now, where are we? Let's do a little level setting here of what all this stuff I've talked about. Ideally, at this point, we've established an organization structure, CCOE. We understand what our high-level framework is that's going to guide our cloud security decisions. We're going to steal our control objectives from other sources as best we can. We hopefully cribbed our control specifications from the cloud provider using screen scraping, like a bot, down like a bot. We're going to database all the controls and stuff so we can actually manage everything. Like if I have S3 block public access on, I should do that once, and I should know what compliance frameworks and requirements that meets. I shouldn't have to look at that 12 times. I should know once, and that's what the whole purpose of that database idea is. We've implemented some governance as code. We've done a little IAM protection. Maybe we pick some tools, whatever they want to call themselves, that's fine. They can self-identify, we don't care, but we get the tools that are going to help us achieve our outcomes. Now, how do we actually pull this off with the rest of our organization? How do we govern for frictionless outcome? How do we make ourselves as frictionless as possible? Because developers are sure as heck going to try, and they're the raptors testing the fence. Raptors and toddlers and developers, they're all the same. They're always looking for a way to escape their enclosures. And in these cases, what are some of the things we can do to minimize that in a way that's not going to get, and by the way, I don't mean that in an insulting or patronizing way. They've got jobs to do. They got to write code. They've got deadlines. They have to have their outputs, okay? Let's understand their motivations. And let's figure out how we can put enough control in to let them move as fast as possible with breaking as few things as possible. One is org isolation. I am a huge, huge fan of using the organizational management tools and the hierarchies in the cloud provider to separate production from development to the greatest degree possible and use that for blast radius isolation. Have your fun in your sandboxes, but when it comes to production, that's when we got to lock things down. By the way, you know who else really likes that? Operations, because then things break less if you have more control over your production environments. So it's not just a security thing. You work with ops, like production's got to be locked down, should all be through infrastructure as code. Minimizing access. Let them run wild in sandbox accounts, as long as there's no production data in there. Had this discussion again yesterday. Like, how do I define a production environment? It's anything with production data or can touch production data, no matter what they tell me the name of it is. That's that focus. But minimize access to those environments, but give them all the tools they need in every other environment. And then have separate pipelines for development and production. Why? This whole software supply chain stuff, pipelines have credentials. Pipelines can make changes through infrastructure as code. You should have that isolated out to the greatest degree possible. There's a level of details I can't get into because of time, but you can hit me up afterwards on how to do that, and I have some reference architectures out there. So we want to start by providing tools for these teams. Let's build a security version control repository. Let's give them the known good states that they can build off of, instead of making them build everything from scratch and then we just criticize it. Okay? Don't just be a critic, be a provider of content. And having a version control repository, GitHub, whatever you want to keep it. Also having artifacts for baseline images and stuff. So we're giving them baselines they can build off of. It's not you have to only use these. It is you have to start with these. You have to tell me what's changed before it goes into production. I don't care in development. And then we can go through an approval process if there's any concerns there. Give them a known good state to start from. Also, within these teams, recruit security champions, not a business information security officer. Security champion is somebody who is inquisitive, who is interested in security. Let them go to DEF CON, bring them to hacker conferences, do lunch and learns, make it fun, because you just want them to be security aware, and they are a liaison. They're not the school cop. Okay? Their job is to answer questions, to know when to ask security for questions, to be an advocate for security on their teams. They're a champion of security. They're not an information security officer. All right? Maybe give them a little more money, I don't know, send them to cool conferences and different kinds of training. But don't try and force them to be a security professional. They're not. All right? You're going to kill their enthusiasm faster than anything else if you send them to a CISSP boot camp. Killed my enthusiasm. I had to go and be a paramedic for a while just because so I could do something easier. Then you want to make sure you go full DevOps yourselves as the security team. Use your own pipelines for generating security artifacts. Adopt automation. Look at things like governance as code, which is those service control policies. And there's different levels of policies that can be enforced in pipeline. Get into ChatOps. And does anybody have a better graphic for DevOps? Because I'm really sick of this one, but I can't find any other one that I put on screen. Everybody knows what I mean. Yeah, all right, I'm sick of that one. And then, at some point, we're going to have to start doing things like code scanning and infrastructure as code scanning and shifting left into the pipelines ourselves. Most of you probably do this to some degree today. What's the fastest way to cause problems? And that's that reference architecture. Well, if you give them a bunch of alerts and you haven't groomed the issues and prioritized them, it just gets in the way. If you break builds without having any understanding of why and how you're breaking those builds, that's going to be a problem. If you're not responsive when they have their requests for exemptions, that's going to be a problem. You want to give them a lot of freedom and stuff in the sandboxes. Put your SaaS, your DAS, your SCA tools, and everything else in the pipelines and enforce there, but be smart about it. Like when we ran this the first time for my team, myself and the CTO, groomed issues before we sent it to the developers. We wiped out massive categories of things that didn't matter, because it was vulnerabilities and components that weren't deployed into the cloud, but were on the local system because we were using serverless framework as a specific example. You don't want to throw a lot of noise at them, be the one that cried wolf, and then didn't let them get their job done. That's kind of what security can be sometimes. We're going to cry wolf, and then we're going to lock the doors and not let you leave the house, including without a functional bathroom. And one of my favorite tools for dealing with a lot of this and communicating to teams is ChatOps. That's where they live all day, every day. Are you emailing a spreadsheet of misconfigurations, or are you sending them a ChatOps message with that misconfiguration with a button where they can request an exemption or maybe remediate it or do whatever, investigate it themselves right then and there? Use the tools that they use. Go where they go. That's going to be a much more effective way for you to govern the new autonomy and decentralization that we're dealing with as we move into cloud and as they adopt DevOps pieces. And if you do decide to go into automated enforcement, there's different levels. One of it is those policies that we talked about that block and turn everything off, service control policies and others. But there's also reactive guardrails. You can write an Azure policy that'll auto-revert something. You can use tooling to auto-enforce tags, disable S3 buckets. There's a lot you can do, but you need to be smart about it. Introduce it gradually. Enforce it in the right environments. I'm a huge fan of automation. I've been writing automation code and demos for 7-8 years now, starting with some stuff I did over at Black Hat. And I love it, But you know what? If you just turn it on everywhere, you're going to break stuff. And you're going to piss people off. And you're going to get in the way of them getting their jobs done. Now, we need to stop them from doing bad things, but we can do that. We can be smart with our automation by testing and tuning and being good about exemptions and focusing automation on the really critical parts. And the other stuff, you know what? That's where you can integrate it with your either a workflow system like ServiceNow with the buttons to click through, or ChatOps, whatever is best for your culture to go ahead and do that. And our idea is that security should be a backstop, not a blocker. If you're a rock climber, you know what a gree-gree is. And the whole idea of a gree-gree is frictionless belay device to allow people the climbers to climb fast, and when something happens, that thing snaps into place and they don't fall to the ground and die. I once took a 30-foot fall rock climbing. It was not fun. Long story. Then, actually not a long story, just a weird story. So be good about exemptions, compensating controls, finding out what's their reasoning for doing what they're doing, and do we have a way to actually still support that without breaking things. Build the relationships, use your security champions. None of this is going to solve all of our problems, but stage 3 should be profit. We should finally be getting further along. But it starts with those executives. It starts with your org structure, being good about your control objectives, your control specifications, and your policies, and then eventually getting those so you can flow them down into a technical level. And using tools and using technologies like our version control repositories and my little database example and things to actually help us achieve this quickly without slowing our organizations down and being the jerks. Thank you for your time. I don't have time for Q&A now because I ran right up to the end, but I will be out in the hallway in 2 minutes if anybody has any questions. And I am like one of the easiest people out there to track down.